CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. What an interesting day I had. It's one of these moments where you get a bit of conversation with somebody that just kind of makes you think, where have you been? What hole has your head been? Where are your political leanings? How did you get here? What brought us to this place? And I think about this as a country. I mean, you know, when I grew up, you know, the right and the left, they had their viewpoints. Liberals and conservatives and Democrats and Republicans actually had, morals and values and beliefs, had an agenda. Oh, how that's changed. And it started with an email. And I got an email from someone who didn't identify himself. One of those kind of emails with a bunch of letters and a whole bunch of numbers. Not sure how it was generated, but not something someone wanted me to be able to recognize. Threw out just a 2-line email, said, "I heard your show last night with the beer guy." He was talking about Fred Willman from the Beer Project. "I don't get why you libs care about the transgender freaks." He said something about Dems putting up some fight of over 4 people in the entire state of Missouri. And I sat and I thought about this. And I've been thinking about it all day long. There used to be a moment, and this is one of those struggles I have where our politics have taken us. Because understand, what we've seen the conservative movement morph into is really a hate party. What we've seen the right turn into is really a bunch of extremists, fascists. The new right, not the Q kooks, not the hate mongers that currently reside as the GOP, but the new right of the political spectrum, the fascists. Not your grandfather's right wing. Well, actually, your great-grandfather's right wing. These are the folks who are economically populist, culturally ultra-conservative, and hyper-nationalistic. These are your tan pant wearing, tiki torch, flame carrying, your new kind of Nazi. There are those, and then there are the crazy, everyone's a pedophile and everyone's a groomer, and you've got this division, and it's all about grievance, it's all about anger, it's all about division, it's all about hatred, it's all about destruction, and it's all funded from the very wealthy, because again, they don't want working people to come together and think forward. So as I'm looking at this 2-line email, and maybe it's just I spend too much time dissecting this person's thoughts, because I responded and I didn't get a response back. The first part, why do you libs care? And part of it is, I consider myself a liberal, but in the Kennedy sense of what a liberal is. And if you remember the John Kennedy, idea, if you mean a liberal as someone who looks ahead and not behind, someone who welcomes new ideas without rigid reaction, someone who cares about the welfare of others, someone who cares about their health, their housing, their schools, their jobs, their civil rights, their civil liberties, someone who believes we can break through the stalemates and the suspicions that grip us. If that's what you mean by liberal, then yeah, I am that. And I proudly take on the lib title. Call me the libtard. And I'll wear it because I believe we can move forward. We can make lives better. And you know what? Even if it is 4 people in a state, we used to believe that everyone mattered. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And I believe this. Now look, I've said this before a bunch of times. I don't understand the transgender stuff. I don't. And I have friends who have gone through it. Don't understand it. And as I've told them, I don't, and I'm grateful I don't understand it. I don't know what it's like to wake up every day for years, for decades, going, I believe I should be somebody else. I have no idea how torturous that would be. But you know whose decision it is to do anything about that? Not mine. And certainly not this guy's. So why do I care? Well, I care because that could be me. That could be anyone. Because I believe in life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And I started thinking about the jingoism. Again, the hyper-nationalism. My conservative friends who love to tell me that we need to say the Pledge of the Allegiance every day. It's the same people, by the way, who were telling me during the 10s how we needed to carry our constitutions with us everywhere we went. In fact, had beautiful ones in their pockets. Beautiful unopened constitutions that they never bothered to read, but was always right there by their heart because they were so pleased with them. And it's the same thing with the Pledge of Allegiance. They're happy. They got the first part, Pledge Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And then they forgot about the republic for which it stands. And the liberty and justice for all. They remember the God part. Oh, one nation under my God. Never mind anyone else's. Never mind. But it's that with liberty and justice for all part that, again, I learned as a child that was so important. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, liberty and justice for all. Words that used to have meaning, now we use as platitudes. Now we use as attack lines. Now we get some half-wit going, you libs care about these freaks. And look, as I said, I don't understand it. And I'm grateful I don't understand it. Because I don't know how torturous it is. And as a friend who I've known for, I guess, 17 years now, came to me a year ago and, we had a conversation, was transitioning. I said, I don't get it, never going to get it. I wish you the best. I hope this is the happiness that you need. I hope this is what you're looking for. Do I understand everything about it? Do I get it? No. Are there going to be bumps along the way? Absolutely. Do I agree with absolutely every part of every bit that's going on? No. But we're never supposed to, and we're never going to. But to attack people who are seeking their happiness, who are pursuing that happiness, that life, liberty, I'm struggling with this. And then they're freaks. Well, you know what? I think a lot of those people who show up to Trump rallies are freaks. Should we be condemning them? I think someone who would send me an email with this many misspelled words is a freak. Should we be coming after you? Should we be passing legislation to call you out? And when you have the power of the government, and this again, this is what conservatives, and I'm reaching out to my conservative friends because my liberal friends understand this. My progressive friends know this. Government is not the place where you do these kind of things. Government is not the place to hash out these kind of personal decisions. Conservatives used to understand that. Conservatives used to understand that you don't use the power of the state to come down on those four people. You don't use the power of the state against the individual. They used to believe it, man. But now they see the power. The fascists have convinced them, they have, that we can make them think the way we do. That we're going to get the children to think the way we do. We're going to hijack education. Because there's that theory about race that's critical that none of them can articulate or understand, but they're being force-fed the outrage candy by the chaos merchants who keep ramming it down their throat, and they keep buying it. This is the frustrating part that I have in this. Because I get this kind of email often. You know, why do you stand up for them? You're not one of them. No, I'm not. But I empathize. I want them to be happy. I want them to lead their best life. And I don't think that's too much to ask in the greatest country in the world, or so we're told. If we can't be gracious enough, if we can't be warm enough and decent enough, what are we? I keep being told we're a Christian nation. What's that thing that they throw out all the time? The misquote of Gandhi. They attribute it to Gandhi. I like your Christians. I like your Christ, just not your Christians. If he said it, I agree with it. Because look at how angry and mean and spiteful and hateful these folks are. All because they don't agree. All because they don't understand. And all because they're fortunate that maybe they've got it all together. Maybe they're special. But for those folks who don't, and the folks I don't understand, I'm a little more forgiving. Maybe a little more tolerant. Maybe we could all be, just a little bit. Love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you want to weigh in, I'd love to hear it. You can also email me like my email friend who called me a lib. And do you take that as an insult? 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Also, remember, grab the podcast. Go to the website and grab that, or wherever you get your podcasts. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show for working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Alice on line one. Alice, how we doing today?
I'm doing okay.
What's on your mind?
Oh, a couple of things. First of all, I don't take it as an insult when someone calls me a lib. I have been known to throw a Republican politician off of my property when they called me a Republican. That's a true story. Second of all, the right-wing evangelicals, the extreme Puritan bunch, historically, and I'm talking going back to the first century of Christianity, if one is a student of history, this is going back to the roots. The very first century, after Paul, Saul, whatever you want to call him, created Christianity, the rabble-rousers went around, and they were doing this. I mean, they were encouraged to literally, they went into people's houses, and they destroyed pagan materials. They destroyed the library at Alexander. They literally stoned to death Greek philosophers. So, I mean, it's not something that they haven't done in the past. That they've done it before. And the last thing I wanted to say is I don't bend the knee to anybody. One of my ancestors said during the Revolutionary War, when his brother warned him not to sign the Declaration of Independence, he said, "Damn the consequences and give me the pen." So, you know, the right wings they're out of hand, and somebody better do something pretty quick because I think people are really getting tired of it. But you have a good evening.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it. Good stuff. I'm right there with you. Thanks. Let's go to line 3. Got Christian on line 3. Christian, what's on your mind?
Hey, Rick. Well, what's on my mind is, would consider myself, if I had to label myself, I'd say I'm a leftist. But I'm starting to wonder whether or not I'm a leftist or I just have compassion and empathy for marginalized groups of people and the working class people of this country. There's so much that's going on right now with Elon Musk buying Twitter for billions and billions of dollars, but where's the World Hunger Plan or all these issues we could solve with that money instead of just ego pumping, money exchanging hands, all these business deals. I feel like there's a lot more that should be done, but we're stuck here arguing against billionaires buying newspapers and all this type of stuff. It just seems like, for the working people of this country and the empathetic liberals, I guess you could say, it's kind of, it brings you down a little bit, seeing what's going on around the country.
Yeah, I'm with you, but this is where I keep coming back to what my friend Morris Pearl says over at the Patriotic Millionaires. It is time to tax the rich. It's time to tax them heavily. It's time to go back to the good socialist President Dwight David Eisenhower's tax code and start taxing them mightily and use that money to do exactly what you said. Start feeding the hungry, finding shelter for the homeless, and taking care of the sick and infirmed, and start doing, if we're going to be the Christian nation they keep telling us that we are, how about doing some of those things that we were told to do?
Hallelujah and amen to that. And Dwight D. Eisenhower, last best Republican president that this country's ever had. Farewell address, he said it the best. Every warship launched, every gun made is a theft from those who are hungry, those who are cold, those who aren't housed. 100% agree with you, Rick, and I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thanks so much, Christian. Good stuff. Thanks so much. Let's go on to, let's see who we got here. We got Jim in Chicago on line 2. Jim, how are we doing today?
Good, Rick. How about yourself?
I'm great. What's on your mind, brother?
Couple of quick comments about what you touched on about the religion and the flag and tolerance. I kind of found through the years in my experience that people that wrap themselves around a flag are generally, in the most sense, the least patriotic people and use that flag to cover whatever their nefarious activities might be. And I also find that those that wrap themselves in religion seem to be the most kinkiest, freakiest people around, and they use their religion as a cover. And just to end on a lighter note about tolerance, tolerance is a good thing, and what can really help with tolerance is to find the right combination of drugs and or alcohol. Thank you.
Good stuff, Jim. Thanks so much, brother. That's great. No, I mean, to Jim's point, honestly, and I've said this before a bunch of times, the only times I've ever been ripped off are by people who've told me how religious they are. In any business dealings I've gotten, it's always been the hyper religious and, oh, we're so pious. Those are the people who cheat you, that have always cheated me. My personal experience, that's what I'm sharing, not broad blanket for anyone else, and I'm sure someone else will probably agree with me. And you can do that by emailing me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. But here's the thing, and I go back to what Christian said. You know, the reality is we have allowed over the last 40, 50 years our tax code to go to people like Musk and creating this billionaire boys club. And it's mostly boys. There's just some women, the Waltons, there's a couple. But really it's the billionaire boys club. And we've through our sacrifice, we've tightened our belt. We've created the largest billionaire class in the history of civilization, and they've done really nothing legacy-wise with it. You go, oh, they've built great corporations. They've done it. No, have they really helped humanity? And this is where I go back to Bernie Sanders' piece late last week, that I talked about. Whoever figures out how to get into space, because Musk and Bezos, there's other reasons they're going to space other than we're just going to play with our phallic rockets in front of everybody. They can play with phallic things all they want behind closed doors. Going up into space is a whole different reason. They want to figure out how to extract things off those asteroids and outer space and get it back here. They don't want to go live their life in outer space. Way too difficult, not the plan. They want to be the first trillionaire. This is about ego. This is about them. It's not about us. And this is why I'm a believer in government. A government of, for, and by we the people. We haven't had that in a very long time. I'm not naive enough to believe that in my lifetime that's happened. I strive for it. I want that. I believe that we can do this. I believe that an educated, active, engaged working class, folks like you and me coming together and saying we demand better, can accomplish this once we start recognizing when they're feeding us the outrage candy, and once we start spitting it out in their face, saying no more. We're not going to let this kind of stuff that you throw out in front of us to divide us keep us pitted against one another. Because what this is meant to do is continue to rob us blind. And this is the weird part. I look at the guy who sent me this email, didn't put his name on it because he really ashamed. And if you're listening, please call us. I want to know why you sent this without a name. Other than just to enrage, other than just to keep others as miserable as you must be. Because we have to stop this. The only way we have a chance is if we come together. Because look, they've got all the money. They control the media. They control, virtually all of the arms of communications. Musk just bought Twitter out of lark. Hey, I'm going to open it up. But we've done one thing that they can't do. You ready for it? We've outprocreated them. There are more of us. And while we still can, we can vote. And if we vote in the right direction, we still have a system right now where we can get people like us into the halls of power to make people like them pay their fair share in taxes. And we can use that money for healthcare, for education, for infrastructure, for, taking care of the hungry, the poor, the sick, whatever we need to do. That's the America I want to live in. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1944. That was the day the Army National Guard seized the Chicago property of Montgomery Ward and removed its chairman, Sewell Avery. The Chicago-based company repeatedly refused to accept a National War Labor Board order to recognize the workers' union and abide by the board-negotiated collective bargaining agreements. After refusing the second board order, President Franklin Roosevelt ordered the Army National Guard to seize the company's central mail order house, retail store, and other related properties in the city. Avery was physically carried out of his office. Wartime no-strike pledges were in effect to avoid strikes or any disruption in war production. From a distance, it looked as if the president had triumphed the cause of labor in forcefully implementing the Wagner Act. Workers of the CIO United Mail Order, Warehouse, and Retail Employees Union had walked off the job over recognition issues on April 12th. Montgomery Ward officials argued again, as they had 2 years earlier, that they were not engaged in war production, held no government contracts, and that the dispute is not one which might impede the prosecution of the war by the board's own terms. But the government feared strike activity would only spread to other industries in Chicago and elsewhere. Local Teamsters and railway brotherhoods all supported the strike and refused to handle shipments to and from Ward facilities. The CIO union agreed to end the strike on the eve of the seizure. Others in the labor movement called FDR's move a hoax and a device to break strikes and get workers back on the job without any gains. Roosevelt issued a third seizure of Ward's facilities nationwide by the end of the year. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Question: what does a packet of M&Ms and your local veterinarian have in common? Answer: both are owned by Mars, Inc., the global candy monopolist. Since the 1980s, we've seen massive consolidations in industry after industry, from airlines to newspapers, the internet to candy. These monopolists run roughshod over consumers, workers, communities, suppliers, and our nation's commitment to the common good. And now the corporate attitude seems to be, what the hell, why not let monopolization go to the dogs? This change has been led by private equity groups. They are corporate takeover sharks that borrow billions of dollars to buy out, plunder, then sell off the remnants of established businesses. They target enterprises that can be grabbed on the cheap but have assets like a loyal customer base. Then the sharks raise prices on those customers while cutting staff and quality of service. This has been happening to thousands of local vet practices and hospitals, which have quietly been plucked by Wall Street entities bearing nondescript acronyms like IVC, JAB, KKR, and VCA. At first, locals don't notice the takeover because the corporate outfit not only buys your friendly Dr. Barry Bones vet service, but they also buy the doc's name. As an IVC takeover consultant confided, people like to take their dogs to local vets and not feel like it's a corporate machine. But increasingly, it is. Solo practitioners now must answer to bean counters at headquarters, such as VCA, Veterinary Center of America, which has 1,000 vet practices across the country and is now owned by Mars, Inc. This is Jim Hightower saying one feisty group battling monopolizers is the National Veterinary Professionals Union. Get info at natvup.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So since the Twitter was brought up in the last segment, kind of got to wonder, and this, even Bezos brought this up, the possibility, maybe, don't know, what's going to happen with China? Musk, has got a lot of ties with Tesla in China and the batteries and all this stuff. A lot of questions there, but now Twitter, is this possibly, I'm just kind of throwing this out here. It's all about free speech, we're told, right? If we're led to believe what Musk is saying, it's about the public square, it's about opening it up to free speech, yet lots of ties with the Communist Chinese Party, not such big fans of free speech. And it's a question I've got to ask my expert, which is why I've asked my good friend Scott Paul to come share some thoughts with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, their website, americanmanufacturing.org. He is my go-to guy on everything China. So, Scott, thanks for taking some time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is great to be with you tonight, as always.
So let me ask you, is it too much to ask the question of, is it out of bounds to wonder if, maybe there's something possibly that, I don't know, Musk, China, Tesla, anything?
Yeah, I think it's this very, very serious concern, his business dealings in China. And here's why. I mean, you just said that, an autocrat's kind of worst enemy is free speech. It's not permitted in China insofar as dissent against a government position or individual. Okay. And so the problem is this, that, Elon Musk's one of his major companies is Tesla. Tesla's second biggest market in the world is China. They've sold something like 300,000 or more vehicles there. They have a factory in Shanghai. They have showrooms all over the country. And he's already had interactions with the Chinese government where, they've had to be very careful about the way in which they operate there once they get concerns about if the Chinese Communist Party has a concern about the way that Tesla's operating. So there's already evidence that he's had to consider that. So what if what if Beijing gets upset because there's too much Hong Kong speech on Twitter, or there's too much Uyghur genocide speech on Twitter, or even there's too much criticism that the Chinese government has not broken with Russia over the invasion of Ukraine, or anything else like that. And so I do think that he needs to very clearly state kind of what the separation of the businesses is going to be, what the policy is going to be, because I think that it is there's a lot of conflicts that are both potential and actual conflicts taking place right now that could undermine either the legitimacy of Twitter or the way in which I think we're all used to seeing it operating, which is imperfect, of course, but is not, is not, tries to work past the censorship and has a robust conversation about what's happening in China on there right now.
It's just one of those things where my first reaction was no one person should be able to own that. And this, for me, there's a whole bunch of this. The China part didn't come until I saw the Bezos question, till Jeff Bezos brought it up. And he was retweeting somebody else and all of that. For me, the fact that one person can muster up this kind of wealth to buy this and have control of something this powerful, for me is just, this should be that moment as a country where we go, this has gotten out of hand. We now need to rein some of this extraordinary wealth in, because the inequality now has just gotten way out of hand. It's time to start reining this in, because this isn't healthy for democracy.
Yeah, he's controlling one of the main corners of the public square, and he obviously has very very forceful views on a lot of issues that again are not aligned with, I guess, liberal small L thinking. Like a tolerance for the right to organize, for instance, or criticism of his own business dealings, and again this conflict with China, and we could go on and on and on, but it is it's troubling on a bunch of different levels. And what I don't know what Twitter's going to become, but and what he's going to do with it, because but it's clear that he wants some sort of control, because he's not going to I mean, he turns more profits at these other places than he ever will at Twitter. I think Twitter has the revenues of like Olive Garden. So, he's bought the Olive Garden of social media, I guess. No disrespect meant to Olive Garden, but it just doesn't. It's not busting the seams with revenue.
Gotcha. That's brilliant. But but I look at this, and you hit something there that caught my ear. What about labor organizing? What about labor messaging? Because look, you could argue, and he has, that it's the public square. I don't necessarily agree that it's public square. Public square is public square. I prefer to go that's public square. This is still a privately owned entity that's still going to have terms of service, even if Elon Musk owns it. So it's still going to be a private entity with this stuff going on. It's just going to have someone else changing the rules. That whole First Amendment still doesn't apply. At least I don't believe it does. But the labor organizing part is an interesting thing for me that you brought up, because now you've got this this extraordinarily wealthy guy who can crush labor speech or create algorithms that will ensure that nobody sees labor speech.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, I think that's right. That's a real danger. And so I think he needs to speak to that and about the types of controls and limitations and approach they're gonna take with that, as well as just misinformation. Because I think Twitter, obviously, nothing's going to be a perfect product in this regard, but at least when there's crazy stuff out there that is clearly built on misinformation or designed to misinform or designed to create that kind of chaos, then I think at least currently Twitter feels like there's at least some disclosure obligation that they have, and in extreme cases to ban that and to sideline it, right? And so he casts himself as this libertarian kind of free speech zealot, and so we shall see what his limits are, because there's certainly a dangerous to there's obviously we all know this. There's incredible dangers to health, to safety, to all sorts of things of amplifying misinformation that's designed to sow the seeds of chaos.
Well, we know free speech. You don't have absolute free speech in the public square. So why would you think you're going to have it on Twitter? And I've had people, my free speech is restored. Oh, silly person.
Not so much, according to the gospel of Elon Musk, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about here. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is Donald Trump ain't going back, so that's funny to me. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Scott Paul. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website. You can check out the incredible work that they do. Let's get into some of the meat and potatoes. The Musk stuff aside, as important as that is, there's some rumblings about. Hey, we gotta start, rolling in the cheap imports. Got to do something to cut inflation, because look, I believe corporate America's gouging our eyes out. I believe they're raising prices because they can. There's talk of lowering the tariffs again because hey, we need to jack up those trade deficits even worse. Will that help the inflation? Will it stop corporate CEOs from jacking up prices and gouging us even more? I'm curious your thoughts.
No. In a word, no. I think that cutting the tariffs that are in place on Chinese products right now, and keep in mind it's not on all Chinese products, it's on targeted Chinese products, would have no either anti-inflationary impact or get products to us any more quickly, right? And I think those are two things that some people are concerned about right now, and in many cases rightly so. But the answer is not to take these tariffs off. And there's a couple of good reasons for that. Number one is that these goods that we're talking about from China are mostly intermediate goods. That's not something consumers don't buy directly, but it ends up in a part of something that consumers or businesses may purchase. And in any event, that total volume of products amounts to a tiny percentage, maybe like 1%, maybe a little more, of the basket of consumer goods that we consider. So that's not going to, if you're adjusting tariffs a little bit on a little bit of stuff, that's not going to move things in the way that oil supply and demand or energy supply and demand or food or other things are going to, right? And so I think that's an important consideration. But what it would do, Rick, and I think this is the thing that really concerns me, is that we don't have a lot of leverage points with the Chinese government. We just don't. We gave a lot of those up. Those tariffs are one of the few kind of like, solid pieces of leverage that we have to either push back against unfair trade practices in Beijing or to try to get them to change their behavior. Now, I'm not optimistic that we can get the Chinese Communist Party to change its behavior on trade policy, but we at least ought to have that leverage, and we at least ought to have that pushback on unfair trade. And so I think, the Biden administration so far, to its credit, has done a really good job resisting all the calls to get rid of tariffs. But now I think part of this effort, because everybody wants to do something about inflation, it's like, well, it's in our power to adjust these tariffs, but the practical implication is negligible. And the long-term implications, the strategic implications are bad. They're bad. And any thought that companies had of reshoring, right, of bringing some work back to the United States, that'll disappear when these tariffs start to come off. Yeah. Because they'll be like, well, it's back to business as usual. This is great. I can keep sourcing from China and not have to worry about it.
And here's where my mind goes, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong. They'll begin resourcing from China. They'll bring it back, and since we're already used to the higher prices, they're going to just keep charging us the higher prices and pocket the extra that they're saving. So it never trickles down. Never.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'd be curious to know if any of your listeners think that the savings would actually accrue and you'd see a lower price for a consumer product as a result of this tariff. Because I am with you. I don't think that happens. I think that the margins get better for the companies that do it. I think their profits get better. I don't see consumers benefiting from a tariff cut like that. It's something that's not going to show up. They will certainly use it as an excuse to jack up prices. But yeah, they're going to keep them there. They're not going to bring them down. And they're going to pocket the savings, and then it has a whole bunch of other spillover effects that I mentioned, where you're not going to be able to reshore the way we want to reshore. We lose a leverage point, and with the dollar strengthening, currency policy is a bizarre thing, but a stronger dollar actually means that it's harder for our exports to get out of the country, and that it's easier for imports to come in. And so when you combine lower tariffs, a stronger dollar, that means we're going to have a surge of imports that would come into the country, and that would wipe out a lot of manufacturing demand, which would be a really, really bad thing to do. Have we learned nothing over the last 2 years plus? We got to make some stuff here in the United States of America.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. You got a thought, question, comment? Give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Do you really think that the prices would come down if we got the cheap plastic crap from China? If you thought they could dump again? I want to hear it. 1-866-416-RICK. But I go back to this, Scott, because we've been sold this line for so long that, they should be able to have we should have the choice, give the consumers of choice. But the sad reality is when I go to the store, I don't get a choice. I went looking for a cable today. There are no American-made cables on the shelves anymore. And this has happened in product after product after product, because they're just not there. These companies have made the choice. We're going to go make it in the cheapest country possible. We're going to bring it back here. We're going to fatten our bottom lines, which is why we're seeing corporate profits at they haven't been this high since the 1950s. CEO pays through the roof. Shareholders are thrilled, but working people are getting screwed because inflation hurts, man.
Yeah, it sure does. It sure does. And I just want to give you a very tangible example of what you're talking about. And this goes back a way, but it still holds true today. And I'll never forget this. I was on a bus tour with some members of Congress in the aftermath of NAFTA, like 4 or 5 years after NAFTA passed, looking at the impacts. And we were in Georgia, and the late, amazing John Lewis was on the bus with us, which was just a spectacular thing to hear his stories. But he introduced us to some workers, some African-American women who had worked at a factory that made telephonic equipment for AT&T in Georgia. Okay. After NAFTA passed, this factory closed down. It moved to Mexico. Okay. And AT&T was like, well, you'll get better consumer prices. So one of these ladies worked at Walmart as a cashier. And one day she said she saw the phone that she used to make come across, her register. Someone was buying it. And it was the same price. It was the same price as it had been when it was made in the United States of America. Who was better off? AT&T shareholders, AT&T itself. But who was not better off? Those workers who went from a union manufacturing job to working in Walmart, and the consumers are getting duped. Yep. So it is it's a Ponzi scheme that these companies play. Tariffs are not the driver of inflation or unemployment or recession in the United States. We got to keep them on. We got to make China get some progress, but we should not be taking them off in this kind of idea that somehow inflation is going to come down and all of our consumers are going to benefit.
I'm right there with you. Scott, as always, I appreciate the time, the input, the expertise. Great stuff you guys do. Keep up the great work, my friend.
All right. Likewise, Rick. Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Our good friend Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Make sure you check out the website, americanmanufacturing.org. Great stuff, good resources. Most certainly stuff you want to see. Going to take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss a second of the program. Take it wherever you go. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1975. That was the day the AFL-CIO held a Jobs Now rally in Washington, D.C. A painful recession had pushed unemployment in the U.S. to 9%. Many workers across the nation thought the Ford administration was not doing enough to address the needs of working families. 60,000 people, many of them union members carrying banners representing their unions, gathered in RFK Stadium. There they heard speeches, including one from Senator Hubert H. Humphrey, who had served as vice president under Lyndon B. Johnson. His speech described the devastating impact of unemployment. Senator Humphrey said, "Our nation must recommit itself to the goal and the promise of full employment, a job for every American who is willing and able to work. Perhaps we would get bolder action and more compassion from this administration if some of its top advisors had a little taste of unemployment themselves. Perhaps they would know what unemployment is. It's drawing your last unemployment check with no job in sight. It's sitting in the dark to save on the light bill. It's making shoes last another month and driving on bald tires. It's eating a little less so the kids can eat a little more. It's facing eviction because you can't pay the rent or meet the mortgage. It's borrowing from your brother-in-law or letting your insurance lapse. It's facing yourself in the mirror and asking why and how much longer. It's wondering how a nation this rich, this enterprising, this great can let more than 8 million Americans who want to work and need to work go without work. Some protesters rushed the stage at the rally, causing it to end early. But his questions still remain. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. Email us, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you check out the podcast. Always there, always for your enjoyment. Melanie, listening on WQEE 99.1 in Atlanta, asked the question, what is the number one thing you think Joe Biden can do right now to help working people? Wow. I sat and I thought about that for a couple of minutes, and thank you, Melanie, for the question. I did see something I think he really can help with. And I think one of the things that I would like to see just broke today, the fact that he, in private meetings with House Democrats, talking about some student loan forgiveness. I just over the weekend had family dinner with a relative, a young relative who was telling me about her student loans, and this poor kid is going to be like $100,000 in debt. And I'm sitting here going, oh my God, I can't imagine being 23 years old and going to be $100,000 in debt and having a job that's probably going to pay somewhere in the mid $20 an hour range. Somewhere we can make somewhere in the mid 40s, which I don't know how you $100,000. That's like a mortgage. How are you going to start a life being that far behind? There has to be something. So you're looking at some 45 million people who are saddled with this kind of debt, an entire generation with massive debt. They're saying, I think on the federal level, like $1.6 trillion. This is federal. Now, the majority of this poor girl's loans were not federal. These were private loans because evidently they're giving them away like candy. And the interest rates are just outrageous. She was telling me 9, 10, 11% interest. I'm going, we haven't seen those kind of rates, since the 70s. How are they gouging a generation? Why are they gouging a generation? How did that happen? How did we allow that? And the truth of the matter is, this is what Education Incorporated has done to us. This is what the attack on public education has been about. It's been about cashing in. It's not about critical race theory. It's not about caring about, we care about the children. It's not about that. It's about the cash. All of these euphemistically named groups and all of these angry mom groups funded overwhelmingly by the people who just want to destroy public education so they can profit off of it. So that, the real dream, to get you to take out a loan so you can send your kid to kindergarten. That's the dream, because every parent wants their kid to have the best, going to have the best kindergarten experience possible. So we're going to take out that $20,000 loan. This kid's $100,000 in debt. And I ran it by her. I said, I got to tell you, I don't know how we deal with this situation. My idea has always been, you took out the loan. You did this. How do we deal with this? And I said, I think the federal government has to buy them all up, and you pay them back at 0.5% interest. And at a certain point, we cap the amount that it costs you, 10 or 15% of your income or whatever that number is for X amount of years. And we start looking at some debt forgiveness down the road, and we start trying to make it right. What we've done to a generation by creating Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and the billionaire class, by cutting taxes to the point to where, we're going to give the money to the smart people because they know what to do with it. Yeah, make themselves more money, while saddling a generation with unreturnable debt. There's no way that in the next 20 years, she's going to pay that $100,000 off and not move out of her parents' house. I mean, it's crazy what we have done, all in the name of skin in the game. It's crazy. And, look, you're going to the same state school. We're not talking about a private school. This is the great part about it. Same school that a relative of hers went to years earlier, decades earlier, and paid a much, much lower rate and wasn't saddled with a lifetime of debt. How'd that happen? We screwed this generation badly. We need to start looking at making it right. We'll take a quick break. Right back with Hour 2. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
while we were out.
Typically, we're talking about this in summer, early fall, even into the middle parts of fall. It's April, and we're talking about these wildfires.
Dangerously early extreme wildfires erupt in the western U.S. Accountability for investor-owned utilities behaving badly, plus...
Our forests are our planet's lungs. They literally are recycling and cycling CO2 out of the atmosphere. That's what they do.
Biden administration protects old-growth forests, but resumes oil and gas leasing.
Well, that's not good. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We can't forget that achieving our ambitious climate goals is going to require nature itself to play a role. That's why today I'm signing an executive order.
To tell nature to knock it off, Jack. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we've been out for a week for spring break. I'm sure nothing at all happened. What do you have to catch us up today?
Well, while we were out, the National Weather Service warned that the western half of the United States is already seeing a dangerously early extreme wildfire season. Unseasonably warm, dry weather, high winds, and an historic mega drought in the west are fueling dozens of deadly, destructive wildfires from Arizona to Nebraska.
That'll teach those losers in the west. Wait a minute, we're in the West.
The most severe fire outbreak is in New Mexico, where Democratic Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham issued emergency declarations after wildfires broke out in nearly half of the state's drought-stricken counties. In Arizona, Republican Governor Doug Ducey warned residents to be extra vigilant.
This is the earliest and most intense start to fire season that we've had.
In California, investor-owned electric utility giant Pacific Gas and Electric will pay $55 million to avoid criminal charges over the Kincaid and Dixie fires, both which were ignited by PG&E's decrepit, aging equipment, and the company says it will vastly expand its fire safety crews.
$55 million?
Yes.
That's it?
According to San Jose Mercury News, the $55 million fine is only a bit more than the CEO's salary for last year.
Exactly. Pocket change. And how many people did they kill?
Also in California, utility giant SoCal Gas will pay a nearly $10 million fine after state regulators caught the investor-owned company illegally using ratepayer money to fund AstroTurf front groups that lobbied against electrifying buildings.
Oh boy, $10 million.
Similar schemes to obstruct the shift away from natural gas have been exposed in nearly 24 states. In the nation's capital, a tragedy. A man who had set himself on fire in front of the Supreme Court building on Earth Day to protest U.S. failure to act on climate change has died. His friends said that the oil companies that are causing climate change are the real radicals.
And they are.
Massive Earth Day marches in D.C. also protested the government's slow pace of climate action. Congress is now back from recess, and congressional Democrats are again trying to craft a budget reconciliation package with climate and clean energy funding that can get the critical vote of obstructionist coal baron Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia.
I'm sure that'll be no problem at all.
The Biden Interior Department says that it will resume required lease sales for onshore oil and gas extraction on public lands, but that it will slash the amount of land available by 80% and will increase royalty rates. The first time in history that the federal government has ever increased what companies pay to extract publicly owned oil and gas. Biden also reversed a Trump-era rollback to restore environmental safeguards to the bedrock National Environmental Policy Act. Major infrastructure projects like highways, pipelines, and oil wells will again be required to undergo rigorous environmental review that must also factor in a project's impacts on climate change and on local communities.
And that is really good news. At least until Donald Trump becomes president again and rolls it all back.
On Earth Day in Seattle, President Biden signed an executive order creating a program to protect old-growth forests containing the nation's biggest and oldest trees because they're critical to absorbing humanity's carbon emissions. However, his order stops short of a total ban on logging old-growth forests. Biden acknowledged the difficulty of enacting climate legislation in the evenly divided Congress, but offered some hope.
In order to help bring bring more of those nature-based solutions into our planning. We have to move quickly. And with this executive order on Earth Day, we're also showing this moment of maximum threat and urgency can also be a moment of enormous hope.
Well, I hope nobody notices the fact that he just opened up a whole bunch of federal lands to oil and gas leases again. For much more on all of those stories and the ones we didn't have time for today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So one of the things coming out of the Meadows direct texts, and again, I said from the beginning that my Congressman Scott Perry was going to be at the heart of this. And I was saying it back on January 6th, that he's somebody, Freedom Caucus guy, patriot guy, somebody dangerous, brigadier general guy, kind of the right-wing Smedley Butler. I could have seen him being the face of a coup, being the guy, no, we're going to make everything okay kind of guy. We now see through these texts that he was the heart of all of this, eyeball deep in it, actually pushing to have our intelligence agencies investigate what are baseless conspiracy theories, all because he pushed the big lie. And I think he has to be held accountable for it. And I don't know if the January 6th committee is going to do it. I hope they do. I hope Democrats stop dragging their feet. I hope Merrick Garland stops dragging his feet. I hope they pull these people in. I hope they perp walk every one of them. But it comes down to you and me. It comes down to us holding them accountable at the ballot box. I don't think what he did is right, and we need to tell him that it's not right. That's why I've asked Shemaine Daniels to come talk with us. She is running in the primary for the right to run against Scott Perry in the 10th Congressional District here in Pennsylvania. She's a Harrisburg councilwoman, congressional candidate. Her website, danielsforcongress.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can check that out. Shemaine, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So, here I'm looking at the information that we've now been uncovered. And I said from the beginning, I believed Scott Perry was into his eyeballs into this mess. I believed he was integral in all of this. I believed he was, a big part of it, and we're now finding that out. So in looking at what we're seeing, what do you think?
No, I don't think there was any doubt that he was involved. I think the question was how involved was he and where, what his level of participation is, and seeing his messaging from, way before January 6th, you realize that he was actively having conversations about how to undermine the smooth transfer of leadership, which is what has made our democracy the model for the rest of the world. So yeah, it's been an interesting interesting data point that's been coming out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the texts to Mark Meadows, he says, Mark, just checking, as time continues to count down 11 days to January 6th, 25 days to inauguration, we got to get going. Where are you going? What's the hurry? What are you plotting? I want to know. What's going on? I want to see the rest of these texts because, look, these are just a handful of picked texts. I want Scott Perry to release his texts. Are you calling for him to release those?
Oh yeah, he absolutely should. I think he needs, if he's going to represent this district, he needs to at least show what he was communicating, what he was talking about. While while those protests were happening in DC, there were also protests happening here in Harrisburg. And, we had to be very concerned about the safety of our residents because we also didn't know what to expect here at the Capitol. The same group of people were participating here. So he owes the residents of his district an explanation of what his activities were in terms of his full participation of those events. We did have significant security concerns in our city because of those protests that were spreading into
now he has been really at the forefront of a lot of the anger, the hatred, the division, the things that are tearing us apart. And I'm hoping that someone like you running the kind of campaign that I've been watching you run is someone who's going to run an idea that, we need to be coming together and moving forward instead of the kind of hatred and division that Scott has been at the front of. And look, I was not horribly against Representative Perry at the beginning, but, these last several years, the Freedom Caucus, the positions he's taken within that movement, I find him to be very dangerous in his role as my representative.
Well, he's dangerous in more than the immediate potential danger he could present. He's dangerous in that he hasn't really been working for us, right? While he spent all of this time urging Meadows to do whatever it is he was urging Meadows to do. We in his district have seen the economy deteriorate. He has opposed things like maternity care. Excuse me. He opposing things like minimum wage. He opposed investing in our infrastructure. And here in Harrisburg, not too long ago, we had a bridge fall down. So he hasn't really been doing or addressing problems in the district. And I think it kind of becomes a natural thing for a leader to then start to be really connected to dividing their constituents so that the constituents don't really get together and say, hey, this guy isn't really working for us, because they are distracted hating each other. But we know that both rural and urban areas in this district have very similar problems, and the root of those problems are having a representative like Perry who hasn't been doing his job.
No, you're absolutely right. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Shemaine Daniels, Harrisburg City Councilwoman, candidate for Congress in the 10th Congressional District. Her website, danielsforcongress.org. She's running against Representative Scott Perry in the general, hopefully down the road. If you want to help her out, go to danielsforcongress.org. I'm sure she could use the help. Maybe a small donation here or there. Campaigns are expensive. Again, danielsforcongress.org. You bring up an interesting point because Perry was one of the guys, another Republican who voted against the infrastructure bill that is going to be so vital to a rural community like where I live and an urban area like where Harrisburg is. As you said, Harrisburg for a while seemed to me to be the sinkhole capital of the world and needs the investment to reduce the sewer lines and the water lines and the bridges and the roads, the capital investments that it needs in the state's capital. He voted against. And I don't know how in good conscience a representative votes against the interests of his constituents, but that's what he did.
Yeah. Absolutely. Actually, the sinkhole was the reason I ran for city council the first time, the big one that made international news, because it was about a block and a half from my house.
No, I was at the Capitol when it swallowed up a bus on State Street.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of these instances. I spent a lot of time in Harrisburg where the backhoe got swallowed up, the garbage truck got swallowed up. You couldn't drive down a street for a while without something happening, and it's all because the sewer lines and the water lines are like 125 years old. And back in the 70s, they were talking about repairing them and replacing them, but they could never get the investment because we get, stick in the mud, we're going to pinch the quarter till the eagle screams kind of congressman like Scott Perry who says we can't invest in this stuff. And it just keeps getting pushed off while they continue to push division and hatred and the kind of stuff that he's been at the front of without thinking, hey, how do we move this country forward and unite us? That's my problem. And that's why we need a change in leadership, Shemaine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So walk me through how you're going to do that, because look, I think our listeners get He's terrible. He's been a horrible congressman. He's done very little for this district other than bring the kind of division that we've seen from the Republican Party, which has turned into nothing but a hate machine. What are you going to do to make it better?
So there are a few things. First of all, just generally speaking, we have to be more open and honest about the conversations about the issues that plague us, right? As Democrats, we need to offer alternatives because people don't come out to vote just because the other guy is bad. So the three things that I want to focus on as I run for office are, again, continuing to invest in infrastructure, which is an issue that plagues both the city here and rural communities. Advancing the rights of women and families. We've seen what's been happening nationwide when it comes to women's reproductive health, maternal mortality, even access to healthcare is a challenge for our families in this district. And also fixing our broken immigration system. As an immigrant myself, I'm often a little disappointed with the conversations that the Democratic Party has around immigration because we're not as strong on it. We don't really talk about the ways in which our district benefits or doesn't benefit from immigration. We don't have robust conversations. We just simply say the suggestions of the other side is wrong, and then we don't proffer our own solutions to the problems, right? So we have a district, in 2016 when the raids were happening in Pennsylvania, the last 7 or so years I've been only an immigration attorney. I got more calls from, Americans who, lost their workforce overnight. And they wanted to know what to do, what they could do to stop it. And I was like, well, the raids were harsh, but they were legal raids. And the reason that they could happen was because there wasn't really a party that the Democratic Party didn't really put in a more structured way for managing removals of individuals. So there were families who lost childcare overnight. There are people with disabilities who their caretakers were immigrants and they lost their caretakers overnight.
So what do you think the way forward on this is? Look, immigration has been an issue since my entire life. I mean, all of my political life, it's been the football that they've kicked around. We've always had this. There's the side that says, no, we slam the door, nobody's allowed in. And then there's the other side, no, we swing the door wide open, let everybody in. And is there a medium? Is there somewhere, where would Shemaine Daniels move that line, or is there a line?
I don't think there is a specific line, right? Immigration as a system is a humongous system that affects workplace, it affects family relationships, it affects tourism, it affects, healthcare, it affects so many systems. So when people talk about immigration being a problem, it can be very specific problems for that particular community, right? So how is immigration a problem for a particular district, right? I'll give you a typical example. So in Pennsylvania, undocumented workers don't have the ability to get a driver's license. So that means that a lot of farmers, when they have a workforce, they may have a workforce that can't drive their equipment. Or they have to be worried that, that someone is not going to be able to get to work or will be picked up while they're doing their job and just vanishes, overnight. So every immigration is such a big problem, like a big issue. It connects with a lot of our systems that you have to talk to people in the district to figure out what do they actually mean by immigration being broken. And I think for us in the district overall, major issues that hurt the system is, first of all, it's understaffed, which means for folks who do have a pathway to enter the US, there is very little staffing to do the work. So they sit in limbo for a really long period of time, if they're lucky, or have to sit as in an undocumented status for a long time until someone processes an application form, right? Over the last few years, it used to be you could, you submit a petition to renew your work authorization a few months before it expires, and you would get your next work authorization in a good time frame. Now it can take a really long time. So someone is walking around with an expired work authorization document, even though they're legally permitted to have work authorization. Folks don't know how to read the document, don't have the ability to know whether or not this person is in fact authorized to work, because so the way it works is you get a letter saying, if you don't get your card within, you can use this letter for another 120 days if you don't get your card, but then the card might not come, for an even longer
So
time.
what you're telling me is the system's really screwed up and we need to do something about it. And it's screwed up on purpose so that it's a mess, because everything in our political system seems to be that way. So we need someone who's going to get in there and fix it. So last question, you got the 30-second elevator pitch. Why Shemaine Daniels?
Well, first of all, I've been in public service my entire life. I've been an attorney for over a decade. I'm a college educator for over a decade. My legal career, the first half I spent raising civil rights and employment rights claim, and my second half doing immigration work. And those are all areas that our district needs expertise in, needs leadership in. I've been in office for 7 years, this is my 9th year. So I have a record that people can see. They can see that I have often voted with my colleagues. I'm also not afraid to stand alone when I think what's being done is wrong. I am a staunch Democrat, but I've also been critical of the party as well, because, I do believe that if you have values, you have to fight for them. And I think we need to offer the residents in this district an alternative to what we currently have. And an alternative is not just the other side is bad. An alternative is like, these are our values and we're going to fight for them. And we're going to make sure that our district comes out healthier 2 years from now than it is today.
There you go. Shemaine, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Keep up the fight. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again. Good luck in the primary, and I wish you the best.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good stuff, Shemaine Daniels. Make sure you check out her website, danielsforcongress.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Maybe help her out a little bit. As I said before, campaigns are expensive, so maybe a little donation will help go a long way. And maybe we get someone like Scott Perry into the retirement community. Maybe he can cause chaos and trouble somewhere else. If you're just joining us, make sure you check out the website, grab the podcast. Also, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
There's a good story coming out of Delta Airlines. Delta is one of the few airlines where the flight attendants are not unionized. And my friend Sarah Nelson's working on that, and good for them. And look, I think all flight attendants should be, especially with all the guff they put up with. But there's a unionizing drive going on, as I understand. Evidently, because of this, and this is one of those brilliant things, that the reason I love, people organizing. Evidently, Delta is now saying that they're going to start paying their flight attendants during the boarding process because I guess nobody else does. This is one of those, hey, don't vote for that union because look what we're going to give you. We're going to give you this. See? This, the power of organizing. Now, for me, if I'm one of the flight attendants, I go, great, you gave us this. This will help us when we start negotiating our first contract because now we got something to hold on to and a next bit to help us get to where we need to go, which is better wages, hours, conditions. So good on them. Good on them. Bernie Sanders talking about the Amazon. They were both Bernie and I guess AOC were in New York on Monday for a shindig with the workers there in Staten Island, and Bernie was going after the president a little bit. He said, look, the president's been the most supportive president of unions that he can remember. He said, Biden has talked more about his support for unions than any president I can remember. That's good. But the time for talk is over. And look, I agree. The time to actually get some stuff done, start pushing in a direction, I think he's right. And Bernie's like saying, look, what you need to do, you need to start cutting contracts off to Amazon for its illegal anti-union activity. This is what the power of the federal government is. And this is why, when Biden came in, some of the stuff I was giving him credit for right away was using the power of procurement to say, look, we're going to make wages, hours, conditions better. We're going to make these jobs better. We're going to demand a $15 an hour wage for federal contractors. That is what we're supposed to do with our purchasing power. That's a good thing. We should be leading the example. We should be making lives better, not making them worse. We should be leading forward, not racing to the bottom. And good on Bernie for calling him out as well. Also, historic news today, Grinnell College, the first, I guess this is a first from what I'm being told, but from wall to wall, the final vote count of the workers there at Grinnell College, the student workers have expanded their union to all hourly student workers on campus, overwhelmingly unionized. I saw this vote, 327 to 6. This is one of those things where you go, I have great faith in the younger generation. I have hope in the younger generation. Holy wow. 327 to 6. Yeah, that's a good thing. Good thing. Every hourly worker there at the college voted to unionize. Now, getting a contract, getting something in writing, helping folks attain that's going to be the next step. But this is important. And as I've been saying, look, we're seeing the kind of organizing that needs to happen. We're seeing the kind of momentum. We're seeing the kind of positivity. We're seeing the messaging. And what came out of the pandemic, out of one side of our political spectrum, the hatred, the anger, the ultranationalism, the new right, the fascist right, the angry economic populist, give me mine. And what we're seeing coming out of the working class of, hey, we should be doing better for all of us. We should be coming together and sharing in the wealth that our labor creates. We are the heroes. We are the frontline heroes. We are the patriotic heroes. We are essential. We are important. That, to me, I got to tell you, is exciting because I've been saying this for years. This is the position that workers should have been taking all along, demanding better wages, hours, conditions, better opportunities. And look, the laundry list of stuff that workers are now demanding, getting more interesting. And you're going to have that when people start feeling empowered to demand better. And I think that's a good thing as well, because we're making lives better. Just my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there, always available. And make sure you email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, David Madlin's going to be here from the Center for American Progress to share some thoughts on Amazon and some of the organizing going on. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1975. That was the day the AFL-CIO held a Jobs Now rally in Washington, D.C. A painful recession had pushed unemployment in the U.S. to 9%. Many workers across the nation thought the Ford administration was not doing enough to address the needs of working families. 60,000 people, many of them union members carrying banners representing their unions, gathered in RFK Stadium. There they heard speeches, including one from Senator Hubert H. Humphrey, who had served as vice president under Lyndon B. Johnson. His speech described the devastating impact of unemployment. Senator Humphrey said, "Our nation must recommit itself to the goal and the promise of full employment, a job for every American who is willing and able to work. Perhaps we would get bolder action and more compassion from this administration if some of its top advisors had a little taste of unemployment themselves. Perhaps they would know what unemployment is. It's drawing your last unemployment check with no job in sight. It's sitting in the dark to save on the light bill. It's making shoes last another month and driving on bald tires. It's eating a little less so the kids can eat a little more. It's facing eviction because you can't pay the rent or meet the mortgage. It's borrowing from your brother-in-law or letting your insurance lapse. It's facing yourself in the mirror and asking why and how much longer. It's wondering how a nation this rich, this enterprising, this great can let more than 8 million Americans who want to work and need to work go without work. Some protesters rushed the stage at the rally, causing it to end early. But his questions still remain. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @laborhistoryin2.
Question: what does a packet of M&Ms and your local veterinarian have in common? Answer: both are owned by Mars, Inc., the global candy monopolist. Since the 1980s, we've seen massive consolidations in industry after industry, from airlines to newspapers, the internet to candy. These monopolists run roughshod over consumers, workers, communities, suppliers, and our nation's commitment to the common good. And now the corporate attitude seems to be, what the hell, why not let monopolization go to the dogs? This change has been led by private equity groups. They are corporate takeover sharks that borrow billions of dollars to buy out, plunder, then sell off the remnants of established businesses. They target enterprises that can be grabbed on the cheap but have assets like a loyal customer base. Then the sharks raise prices on those customers while cutting staff and quality of service. This has been happening to thousands of local vet practices and hospitals, which have quietly been plucked by Wall Street entities bearing nondescript acronyms like IVC, JAB, KKR, and VCA. At first, locals don't notice the takeover because the corporate outfit not only buys your friendly Dr. Barry Bones vet service, but they also buy the doc's name. As an IVC takeover consultant confided, people like to take their dogs to local vets and not feel like it's a corporate machine. But increasingly, it is. Solo practitioners now must answer to bean counters at headquarters, such as VCA, Veterinary Center of America, which has 1,000 vet practices across the country and is now owned by Mars, Inc. This is Jim Hightower saying one feisty group battling monopolizers is the National Veterinary Professionals Union. Get info at NATVU.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So good news coming out of Cary, Illinois. Evidently the first Starbucks in Illinois voted today to unionize. And another in Peoria, a 9-2 win there in Peoria. So now you got two in one day evidently in Illinois, whereas yesterday you had none. Yesterday you had a number of wins at Starbucks. 14-0 win in Baltimore, 15-0 win in Hopewell, New Jersey. Kind of like Starbucks, trouble. This is like 30 now. I think there are 30 Starbucks now. Look, there's a lot of them, but they seem to be falling quickly, and the organizing happening in a very short period of time. Even with Howard Schultz coming back and doing the whole, we're all partners thing, the love fest or whatever that was. And look, the reality is I don't think people are buying it anymore. We came out of the pandemic, that whole hero thing. I think people were taking that seriously, even if employers weren't. So Amazon, I think the world's looking to you next. And here to share some thoughts on, well, maybe is Amazon going to be next? Was it a fluke in Staten Island? Will the vote this week in the other warehouse in Staten Island go the same way? That's why I've asked David Madeline to come talk with us. David is the strategic director of the American Worker Project at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So, I'm looking at this and I'm looking at the Starbucks thing going, yeah, great. We're seeing a wave of organizing happening. That is a good thing. Workers are finally saying, hey, we've got a little power. Let's exercise it in this moment. I'm hoping Amazon is watching.
Well, I think certainly, companies that have their attention has been grabbed by all the workers now that are trying to form unions at, it's Amazon, Starbucks, Apple, a whole lot of employers. And it's not just at one work site. It's not just one warehouse or one, coffee shop. They're kind of all around the country. And a few are starting to win, as you highlighted. And I think this is really big. It has the potential to be very big because, as we know, these are some of the biggest companies in the entire world, making record profits. And we saw that sort of during COVID, that just stark contrast between how essential workers were treated, going to work, risking truly their lives, oftentimes not having adequate protections, and receiving minimal pay boost, if anything. And the CEOs making, record so much so they can, go up into space, which things like that. So, yeah, this is a big moment and a big opportunity here.
Yeah, and one that, people like you and I have been talking about for years, that, the table's been set for a long time. Inequality's been growing. Wages have been suppressed. Corporate profits have been high. CEO pay has been outrageous for decades. The table's been set for a while. It's just been, what was going to be that spark that was going to make workers finally say, you know what, enough's enough already. We demand better. And I think coming out of this pandemic has been that, hey, we demand better.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with this sort of long-term, problem that was potentially enough to cause workers to go to do things like they're doing now, striking and trying to join unions. But you add the pandemic and the contrast we talk about, but there's sort of three other things that I think are really important here that are helping drive these trends. And one is President Biden and his administration are very strongly pro-union. And that is helpful so that workers feel a little bit more protected. Now, our laws, as we know, are nowhere near strong enough, but at least the ones on the books are going to be as enforced as well as they can be under this administration. So that's important. So, too, is the tight labor market. So the workers have a little bit more power, a little bit less likely to get fired, or at least can find another one if they are. And then there's also been a changing tide in public opinion that I think is really important, so that it's not just your show that's covering this. News media of all, like everyone is covering this because the public is more supportive now of unions than they have been in almost any point in U.S. history. And so I think these three things have also supported the workers in their fights as well.
Yeah, it's almost like labor is the new black. That's what I've been saying for a while. It's come back around into vogue, and but here, we've been here for the last 17 years saying this is where we need to be. And I'm grateful we're finally here because, the working class of this country needs this boost. We need to close this massive inequality gap. And look, I look at a place like Amazon where when I started working over 30 years ago, they were paying, 12, 15 bucks an hour back then with health care, with pension security, with workplace safety that is much better than it is today. And yet I see Amazon going, look how wonderful we are. And you go, no, things have gotten so bad that maybe it looks a little bit better, but it wasn't what it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, I think from just the workers at those places perspective, you think of the turnover at a lot of these places is incredibly high, which suggests the jobs are not particularly good. Okay, the pay might be decent at the moment, but the career trajectory is not there, or the health and safety standards aren't sufficient. So, a good job is more than just the dollar that you're getting paid. Of course, that's a big part of it, and that needs to go up as well.
Right.
But the other thing I think you're hinting at, and why this is so important, is it's not just for these workers that matter. The unions do a lot of things. They raise standards for workers all across the spectrum when they have enough strength, and they help make our democracy work because ordinary people are more likely to vote. They have a little bit more power. Politicians are more likely to listen to them, and both of those things we are sorely need: higher wages and more power in the democracy.
So then the question comes, we've kind of painted a little rosy picture. Yay, things are going in the right direction. People want unions. People are organizing. Yay. Problem is Amazon is this giant cancer that seems to, at least in my view, looking to take over every aspect of logistics and package delivery and retail that it can get its hands on. And with it, the employment system of a country, they're moving towards independent contractor, gig work, all of this other kind of futuristic model that they tell me is going to be the wave of the future, but it looks a lot like the past to me. I see bad things ahead as well. How do we make sure we do this right?
This is, as you know, it's kind of a test of what the future of work is going to be like, where workers now are taking on the biggest corporations that are setting the standards for the rest of the economy, and unfortunately they've been often driving down those standards. And I think the question is not just whether the workers are going to win their union, win these union elections, but the next step is to get a union contract so that you have the benefits of unions, higher wages, benefits, protections, and the like. And as significant as the election wins in Staten Island at Amazon, or the dozens of Starbucks ones you've highlighted, no one has got a contract yet. And that's a big, big challenge. Just, the research shows that just 1 in 7 organizing drives leads to a union contract within the first year. Just 1 in 7. Now, a lot of that is they don't get to an election, or they have a hard time. They don't win the election. But then even half, once they've gotten to winning the election, only half get a contract within the first year. Again, these are all because our labor laws are so weak and allow companies lots of tax delay and avoidance strategies.
Right. This is where, my support, back during the Obama years for the crummy Employee Free Choice Act. Because, look, I didn't think the Employee Free Choice Act was the end-all, be-all. I was told it was. But at least it was a minor step forward. It had some additional penalties. And it had, first contract arbitration in it. Whether we could argue that was a good thing or a bad thing, at least there was a pathway to getting that first contract, as I understood it.
Yeah, well, and the PRO Act, which is the current version, is certainly a lot the current version of the labor law, and it's passed the House of Representatives with even some Republican support, so that's a big deal. It's got a long ways to go in the Senate, where the filibuster makes passing almost anything virtually impossible. And the PRO Act is, it's in some ways almost a return to the pre-Taft-Hartley National Labor Relations Act, so getting rid of things like right to work, and allowing workers more power to strike, in addition to the improving penalties for employer violations. So the PRO Act, again, I think there's much more that needs to be done beyond the PRO Act, but the PRO Act is would be a significant step in the right direction.
Yeah. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with David Madeline, Strategic Director of the American Worker Project at the Center for American Progress. AmericanProgress.org, their website. If you want to check out the work that they do. Also, David has written the book Reunion, How Bold Labor Reform Can Repair, Revitalize, and Reunite the United States. We'll get links out on social media, how you can pick that up. A fabulous read, highly suggested. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss a moment of the program. Always have it. Always take it on the go wherever you are. You know, David, I'm looking at this moment. I look at someone like Amazon. I'm looking at, the inflation that we're fighting. And the big part of the inflation is the mass consolidation of these big corporations. And at some point, don't we as a working class have to begin talking about breaking up some of these big behemoths and not allowing an Amazon to get so big? And look, I look at my friends at UPS. I look at, my friends at the Postal Service. They're on the target right now because Amazon, they want to take over logistics and delivery. And if they get what they want, those good-paying, family-sustaining union jobs are all in jeopardy for, hey, you're your own boss. You take on all the risks. You got a gig job now. That's not a way to run a country, I don't think.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of reasons to realize we need stronger anti-monopoly law and especially enforcement of the laws we have on the books. You highlighted sort of some of the main reasons is that, when a single company has so much power, they can dictate the standards in the industry and there's no competition, so workers suffer. But so too do the other firms that, they don't necessarily have competitors, but then they'll have people that need to use them and they'll get ripped off by paying excessive freight. But also, and this was sort of one of the core underpinnings of our antitrust laws, was the idea that once companies got so big, they tended to also have tremendous political power that they used to the detriment of the rest of American citizens. And so I think finally we're catching up to, again, what's old is new again. We sadly are relearning lessons that our predecessors learned 50, 100 years ago. And we're realizing, there's a lot we need to do to worry about when companies get far too big and powerful.
Yeah. So what do you see as in the days of the future? Because look, there's a lot of unions. The Teamsters have committed that they're going to organize Amazon. You've got this startup Amazon labor union group that's empowering the workers in these places. It's got a lot of energy and a lot of community that I love. I love the model. I love the grassroots nature, the bottom up swell, the democracy in the workplace angle, something I think the entire movement can learn a lot from. What do you see going forward?
Well, for these, organizing drives, the sort of standard research shows that when it's worker led, when the workers are talking to their colleagues, that's the most effective strategy. And I think the Amazon workers in Staten Island helped highlight that lesson. But an independent union also benefits from the power and infrastructure and knowledge and history that more traditional unions have. And so I think you're going to see these collaborations where both sides bring their best out of it, where the more independent grassrootsy unions are going to need the institutional labor movement, but the labor movement also needs the revitalization that comes with workers taking action. And so that's the best hope here. Again, they're challenging the biggest companies in the world in a labor law system that allows these companies to do lots and lots that make it very hard for workers to get a union and then a contract. So it's really hard to predict what's going to happen.
Yeah, especially when you look at the fact that Amazon is spending so much money. And Starbucks, too. I mean, you look at the amount of money, and this is where I think the messaging to the greater public is important. A company like Amazon reportedly spent $200 million to deny the workers in Bessemer, Alabama, the vote. I mean, they harassed, intimidated, brought in union busters. They hired people to walk around with sandwich boards. They had websites, and they hired influencers, and they spent money on all kinds of media, and they just inundated. paid the police force to come harass people. They had the postal service bring in a mailbox, especially so they could train cameras on. They plastered the bathrooms with stuff. I mean, they did literally everything that union busters do, and then a little bit more, and still have the resources to do much, much more. But they spent $200 million, which is more than they would have given those workers probably over the next couple of contracts. So, I got to think, as my grandfather always said, if a rich guy's going to take a buck out of his pocket to tell you don't need something, you better spend two to get it, because he understands return on investment. This is that moment. The rich guy's digging deep into his pocket to tell you don't need something. I think he knows something.
Well, yeah, he knows that he doesn't want the workers to set a precedent and he likes the power. The sort of standard line was back from when Walmart, a decade or more ago, when that was sort of the biggest company and everyone was trying to organize them. And the CEO at the time was like, we like driving the bus and we don't want anyone to drive the bus but ourselves, because they get to keep a lot more of the money. And so it's, I think you're seeing that today, where the amount of money and effort that the companies are putting into avoiding unions and busting unions is not just about preventing those workers from joining a union, but they want to send a signal to all the other workers that don't want you to join a union, and so that every other shop is afraid. And that's, again, where the lesson from the Staten Island victory is also so important, because then you do see these sparks where workers can win against very big odds and against lots of money. And now there's a chance, a real fighting chance, and similar like the dozens of places at Starbucks that are winning. And so, yeah, the odds are, or the deck is stacked against them, but the momentum is shifting.
Yeah, this is, I'd rather be in this moment than where we've been up until this point. There are good opportunities here if people take advantage of it and move in the right direction. I think there's some, as I've been saying, I'm guardedly optimistic about what's possible here over the next several months.
I think that's the right approach, is guarded optimism. Reality is not great at the moment with, decades of stagnant wages, the coming out of the pandemic, where essential workers were rhetorically called heroes and treated poorly. Yet there's also this similar sort of moment where there's workers are starting to win, and they're starting to flex some muscles that they haven't flexed in quite some time. And there's a path to change the trajectory of not only their jobs, but kind of all of the jobs in the country.
There you go. David, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Keep up the fabulous work there at the American Worker Project there at the Center for American Progress. It's David Madeline. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick. And you keep up the good work, too.
Thanks so much. Good stuff. Make sure you check out his book, Reunion, How Bold Labor Reform Can Repair, Revitalize, and Reunite the United States. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Highly suggested. Good stuff. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this quick break. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Take the program on the go wherever you go, from iTunes to iHeart, Podbean to Stitcher, everywhere in between. You can find it there. Back after this. Think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Want to grab a couple quick emails to finish up today's program. Gary, listening on AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, Rick, the GOP keeps talking about groomers and pedophiles. And yet there are the groomers like in Tennessee and the pedophiles like the guy in North Dakota. And yes, the pedophile in North Dakota. Evidently, he quit his gig as the longest serving state senator there in this state because some child porn possibilities going on there. He rose to be one of the state's most powerful lawmakers. 46 years this guy was there. And you got to wonder, 79 years old, you got to wonder how many people are going to start coming out of the woodworks. Kind of reminded me when I was in high school, we had an athletic director who had been molesting kids for decades. And when that first kid came out, that first person came out, floodgates opened, and there were literally hundreds. It's amazing how the righteous doth fall. Amy, listening on WAUK AM 540, FM 101.1, The Shaw in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Rick, have you seen the demands the Amazon workers in Staten Island are making? They want $30 an hour. How do they think they're going to get that? I believe in unions. What do you talk about and what you talk about? But you have to agree that's extreme, right? No. Actually, no. I think back to when I first started working. One of my first real union job, 1988. I was making $8.19 an hour in a warehouse. It was a hardware store warehouse. In today's dollars, that would have been over $20 an hour. With healthcare that I didn't pay a dime for, and a defined benefit pension fund that I didn't pay a dime for. Huge number of holidays, vacation, all that stuff. The top rate at the time was like 10 and a quarter, which would have been over $25 an hour. So no, I don't think 25. I don't think 30 is too much in Staten Island, New York. That was in Cleveland where I was. And I talked the other day about a contract up in Massachusetts where it was 1979, they were making 9 and a quarter an hour, which the BLS calculator put at $34.67 an hour. So warehouse work back in the old days was paid right about then. So I think they're taking us back to a time when work in this country mattered, when workers were rewarded commiserately. They made the company huge amounts of profit, like Amazon, because I think Amazon can afford it. I think they're making the right asks there, Amy, and I appreciate the thoughts because look, you got to start with your demands where they need to be, and if you need to walk it back to 25, then you walk it back to 25, but you start asking by 30. So working people pointing at each other, going, "That's too much." No. No. You start the fight by going, we're going to put everything on the table. We're gonna go and we're gonna get the best we can. Because look, Amazon's going to come in and go, "We don't want to pay you anything. We want you to work for free," because it's what they want you to do anyways. Isn't this what the gig stuff's all about? Isn't this why they keep pushing all the responsibility onto the backs of the workforce? Isn't this why we keep seeing this attack on we the people? I mean, look, I go back to years past. The reality is wages were much higher decades ago for working people, because over the last 40 years, corporate America has had the ability to bust up unions and break up and tear us apart, so that we don't ask for what we earn. I'm not going to say deserve, what we earn, and that's the important part: what we are worth and what we earn. Because without us, they don't make this profit. And they know that. Pretty simple stuff. Also, Pete, listening on WELE 1380, The Cat in Daytona Beach, Florida. And welcome to my newest listeners there in Florida. Thanks for being here. Pete writes, thank you, Sanity in Talk Radio, from your newest loyal listener. Thank you, Pete. Appreciate that. Love to get some feedback from our good friends in Daytona Beach. Looking forward to hearing more from the good folks listening on WELE 1380, The Cat in Daytona. And welcome aboard, guys. If you've got thoughts, questions, comments, I'd love to hear it. Maybe we'll use it here on the show. We love the emails, especially the crazy ones, which was where we started the whole day off today. Yes, Yes, this lib did answer your question. But thanks so much for tuning in. If you missed any of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Share it. Share it with your conservative friends. They need to hear it. Wherever you get your podcast, from iTunes to iHeart, Podbean to Stitcher, everywhere in between, it's there for you always, all the time. Again, you got comments, questions? I want to hear them, especially the crazy ones. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.